What's up, squad? It's Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to talk about an article I was reading the other day by some Ivy League educated PhD for the Institute of Peace of All Publications, talking about how the opium trade is being squashed by the Taliban and how that's not a great idea. And for some reason, when America goes in some of these places, the same thing happened in Vietnam. For some reason, the drug production booms, and that's what happened in Afghanistan. Opium was squashed before America got there. America got there, and somehow it magically started booming again. And since the Taliban has taken over, it's been squashed. And this PhD is basically saying this is bad for business. It's a bad idea, even though America is going through a fentanyl crisis, the problem with the Taliban is that they're not big enough drug pushers. So after I read this article and finished throwing up, I really sat down and thought, this is a great story. How did what is portrayed as a ragtag group of soldiers, not the best armed or possibly even the best led, defeat supposedly the greatest superpower the world has ever known to this point? So I started to dig in this story, and it really is interesting, some of the stones I was able to uncover. So if nothing else, just to cite precedent on how this ragtag David beat this massive superpower Goliath. So what we got to understand, right? Let's just go back to geography, right? Geopolitics 101. All of Northern Asia, right, is going to be allocated to Russia. Now, once you start getting into the sweet spot, you get this ethnic cake of layers, right? This cake of ethnic layers that make up Central Asia and continue on down to the subcontinent. Now, at the top of this ethnic cake is going to be what is considered the top Turco-Mongolic group. So base a lot of the separation and delineation based off of course, ethnic history, shared culture, religion, etc. So at this top layer, you get this Turco-Mongolic group, and you can say that top layer stretch all the way from the Anatolian Peninsula all the way to Mongolia in one form or another. And you have the nations of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and this bleeds into Afghanistan. But when you get to Afghanistan, this is where you start seeing that layer switch from Turco-Mongolic to Indo-Europeans. You come across people such as the Hazaras, the Tajiks. This is going to be that belt of middle Afghanistan. So the northern part of Afghanistan is still going to be Turco-Mongolic. You're still going to have the Uzbeks making up about 10% of the population. In that middle belt, this is where you start getting your Hazaras and Shia. The Hazaras is another 10% of the population. Now, the Hazaras, a differentiation among them is that they are Shia Muslims, similar to Iran. And the Tajiks, they make up a larger percentage, about 30% of the Afghan population. And they're predominantly located in northeastern Afghanistan. And they're going to be of the Sunni branch of Islam. Now, beneath that middle layer of cake is another Indo-European layer of the Pashtuns. So the Pashtuns, they make up about 40% of the Afghanistan population and 20% of the Pakistan population. And this is really interesting because although they make up a smaller percentage of the overall population in Pakistan, there are twice as many Pashtuns in Pakistan as there are in Afghanistan due to the population size. And I want to take this all the way down to Pakistan. Now in Pakistan, you have another layer. On that top layer, you're going to have the Pashtuns. And then underneath that, this is when you start to leave the Indo-European branch of language and starts going into the Indo-Europeans. So in Afghanistan, the language of government, of state, of commerce is going to be Pashto or Dari, But when you start going into Pakistan, the language is going to change to an Indo-Aryan language of Urdu. So the reason why this understanding these layers of the cake is so important is because now you can start to see the differentiations and how people will start to move and play based off their preferences. So there's this borderline that separates Afghanistan and Pakistan. Is called the Durand Line, named after Mortimer Durand, who basically established this line in relationships with the Afghanistan through a series of Anglo-Afghan wars, and the line was officially established somewhere around 1893. Now, at that time, it separated, what you can say, the Emir or Kingdom of Afghanistan from British Raj or the subcontinent, because this was all British India. This really came into effect in 1947 when Pakistan and India partitioned, and there was that separation. So what this separation did based off of the Durand Line is it created the state of Pakistan. And it was this state that's going to be that top layer of Pashtuns cut off from their Afghani brothers, welded together with these Indo-Aryans. The reason why this is very interesting is because understanding those layers, understanding how people make moves and commit strategy, people are always going to reach for relations with someone of a shared culture, history, language, because relationships, the core of them is about utility and trust. And it's far more easy to trust members of your own community than other communities because you have so many common appeals that you both pursue and you both find mutually desirable. So when the Uzbeks wanted to do anything in Afghanistan, they would try to reach out to the Uzbeks of North Afghanistan. When the Iranians tried to make moves or wanted to support groups within Afghanistan, they would work with the Shia Muslims such as the Hazaras in Afghanistan. And what we saw in turn is Pakistan relationship with Afghanistan as a problem, because you do have the commonality of the Pashtuns, but what this also can give way to is a feeling of Pashtun nationalism. And Pashtun nationalism is probably the biggest threat internally in the region to Pakistan. And the reason why is because so much of its population is Pashtun. And this would be a dividing line amongst its people, which is built around the Islamic State. This was the partition was all about between Pakistan and India, delineating that Islamic portion of South Asia. It was basically Pakistan and Bangladesh at the time, which was like the Eastern Pakistan. But Bangladesh broke off and separated from Pakistan. But you still have the situation where Pakistan is mixed between these Indo-European groups and Indo-Aryan groups. So if you think about the end of the monarch in Afghanistan and how we got to today, it was a series of phases. And to me, it's three phases. It was the end of the monarchy, which rolled in sort of a Pashtun nationalist phase. But that Pashtun nationalist phase was quickly routed by a Soviet Union interfering in the region. So it's this communist energy that came in and that really tried to bond with the majority of the people across ethnic lines, but primarily in the Pashtun community as well. Now, once that communist leadership came into play, that led to an Islamic rejection of this. And this is where you start to see America and Pakistan into the fray. You have America looking to weaken the Soviet Union. You have Pakistan seeing more and more crazy things happening in Afghanistan and a threat to their sovereignty. Now we have the Mujahideen. The Mujahideen was more or less the global or United Nations of Islamic groups that bonded together that was built to propel out the Soviet invasion, supported by the United States and Pakistan. Now, after the Mujahideen, made up of the various groups, the Tajiks, who are considered more of the military group or also like the professional class in that northeastern portion of Afghanistan, but they were still a hefty majority, 30%. The Hazaras, Uzbeks, Taliban, they all formed together like Captain Planet, repelled out the communists. But once they left, they turned on each other, right? Now it's the power struggle. Who's going to run the Afghanistan? And this is where, in the 90s, we have the civil war in Afghanistan, and we start to see the emergence of the Taliban, which is Arabic for student or seekers. Now, the Taliban, Islamic fundamentalist group, and they are relatively multi-ethnic, but still dominated by the Pashtuns. Some would say, and I do not have inside knowledge on this, but I am surprised that this was not the brainchild of the Pakistani military and its intelligence service, the ISI predominantly. Because what you did with this is they were able to get the Taliban, who had great success in the country, they were able to take over the country and establish Islamic rule. Now, when America came over, that was all threatened. And you had a more inclusive government in various ethnic groups. And who would have known what could have happened? But the Taliban was never truly defeated. And what time has shown is a lot of the leaderships, most infamously the Haqqani family, this Taliban leadership, referenced as the Shuras, were hiding out in Pakistan. So during the entire 20-year occupation of the United States, Pakistan, which is supposedly being a great ally to America, allowing transport, opportunity, supply chains to replenish the forces in Afghanistan. The reason why the Taliban was never truly stamped out was because the Taliban was never truly threatened. They merely went into remission. Maintain, because war is all about supply chain. War is all about supply lines. Can you maintain and replenish your supply? So the Taliban switched their strategy, went to a low profile, and made this a game of basically, I can outlast you. And that's what happened. As America became weary and they started scaling down on their commitment, the Taliban began getting stronger and stronger. This was their strategy. So when you have this situation and America leaves, what happens? The Taliban immediately rushes in without losing a step and take over the country. And the reason why the Taliban is so necessary and so supported by Pakistan, or seemingly so, is because if you don't have Pashtun Islamists, that space may be filled with Pashtun nationalists. And the last thing you want is a unification effort to unite 60 million Indo-European Pashtuns, which can divide and basically subvert the Pakistan government structure. It's truly a threat to their integral sovereignty as they exist. So it's no surprise that the stories are coming out now about the Shuras being refuged in Pakistan. Where was Osama bin Laden at? Where was Osama bin Laden found at? It's no mystery that when the U.S. left these billions of dollars worth of weapons, that they start to turn up in hands of Pakistani resistance fighters in Indian-occupied Kashmir. This is another threat. Pakistan is really, really on edge about India. If a Pashtun movement, not based on Islam, which would unite them with Pakistan, but based on nationalism, a republic around a people, this Pashtun republic, this Pashtunistan, could possibly allies with Pakistan's primary enemy, India. So I think what it all comes down to is these call-outs. There's a very rich stories of these very rich groups that compose this part of Asia. But I walk away with this. One, proximity matters. Force is felt strongest at its source. Afghanistan, being neighbors with Pakistan, this allows Pakistan to have amazing, strong influence, as opposed to America, which is on the other side of the world. So America visited Afghanistan. Pakistan lives there. Every day they're dealing with the relationships in the people, which means that the Pakistan were talking kind of both sides out of their mouth, as the saying would go, saying one thing to the Americans while also allowing support to the Afghanis, which who they were supposed to be working with America to subvert. Second thing I noticed, great strategic move by Pakistan. Control what you can control. Can you stop the Americans from invading Afghanistan? Absolutely not. So what did they do? They said, go have at it. And what they did up front was completely different than what they did in behind. They control what they can control. They said, we may not be able to stop America from coming into our neighborhood, but guess what? We can consolidate our neighborhood and we can exercise influence whenever we need. So whenever there were groups that were going to rise up against the Pashtun majority or the Taliban, Pakistan was right there with goods and resources to replenish Taliban strength. And the last takeaway I have from this was this really made me concerned about the strength and basically the integrity of Pakistan. I think they're a far more dangerous power than North Korea. People always talk about North Korea setting off rockets. North Korea, they're relatively controlled and very relatively stable from. No, of course they want to maintain power, and they're not a powerful country, so they do things like this such as launching rockets to try to get some space. But Pakistan, this is truly a nation under siege. It naturally isn't, but because of its predicament being next to India, in between Afghanistan, and you have this being 20% of 1 out of 5 people being Pashtuns. And you also have Balak separatists. You have various separatist groups that within Pakistan. All these things make it for a very insecure situation. So I'm really going to watch out for how this situation further develops. And of course, you don't want that harboring of the Taliban to backfire in any way. So that's our thoughts. Just an amazing story that I wanted to get out there for lessons learned and definitely to cite some precedents. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I discussed. What do you think about this situation, Central Asian situation? And yeah, feel free to comment below. If you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe. Always love having you. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.